Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Football Diehards DFS show for Week 9. Can you believe we're in Week 9 already? I mean, this is the, I guess, halfway point of the season. We have 18 weeks, so we've reached that midpoint. Um, it's starting to become a point where some of your league playoffs take shape and whatnot. Some of them that start early, you only got a couple of weeks to go, so make those moves now, I guess, and we're into the heart of it though with DFS. I'm joined as always by my co-host Eric Romoff at Fantasy Nav. We're on Saturday night tonight, obviously. Eric, how's it going down there in Texas?
We went through one of our 19 seasons recently, which is pre-fall, where it got a little chilly for a bit. Now we are back into second spring, where it's hot and all of the flowers start blooming again. So that means that we're probably only a few weeks away from actual fall before we get into the ice season.
That's a roller coaster of emotions in a kind of a 3-week period here. We don't get that. We're just it's just ice. It's just ice for the next 5 months in Maine. Although I was telling Emil before the thing, it was quite warm today. It was in the mid-50s. We were cleaning out the garage and getting some outdoor time in before we'll be pinned inside for the winter. And the big news on my end, I promised I'd still feel sorry for you on your end, but betting went live in Maine yesterday morning. Yes. So that's the exciting thing here. I placed I got a promo bet for one of those no-brainers where I could double my money if one 3-pointer was hit in the game, and of course it was hit, so I doubled my money, and I got some props and single game parlays all ready to go tomorrow. So finally, it's exciting. Is there any word on that for you guys down there? What's the legislation deal?
No, nothing promising. We have a very slow moving legislature that will make sure that everyone's pockets are thoroughly lined before anything like that hits the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's kind of how it goes. I think everywhere too. Apparently, I don't really know the ins and outs of it, but we got there's 4 tribes, I guess, that are sharing it. So I assume that's what it took to work it all out, because they passed the legislation 2 years ago. So at that point, I guess it's how the money is divvied up, right? So I'm hoping for you. It's already been fun, like surfing the prop odds and the over unders and kind of seeing how the movements are going, and it helps with DFS too. So I'm hoping for you too. But we are not a betting show. We are a DFS show, and we are going to take you through the entire main slate of Week 9. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. We're live on YouTube right now, if you're listening, obviously. And if you are with us, thank you for joining us on a Saturday night. If you have questions, please feel free to post them in the chat, and Eric and I will get to them as soon as we possibly can and hopefully help you win. These can be DFS questions. These can be anything with your season-long trades, dynasty. We do it all here. So don't be shy. Post them in there. And if you got no questions, just pop in and say hello. We're happy to have you along with us on a Saturday night. Eric, were you ready to break it down this Week 9? We got some buys, we got some international games, so it's a shorter slate than usual. What do you think? Should we get going?
Yeah, shorter slate, kind of an uglier slate, not a bunch of high scoring outfits. So these ones are always fun to weave through.
It is, you're right. And I'm going to kind of start with that there. We've got some fun games this week, but none of them are on the main slate. Miami and Kansas City are in, is it Frankfurt? I think, right. They're Frankfurt, Germany tomorrow. So that's,
I believe they are, yeah.
9:30 my time. And what's that, 7:30 your time or 8:30 your time?
8:30,
tomorrow?
Just an hour.
8:30 a.m. right? 8:30. Okay. So we get some morning football, and it's a doozy. We have Dolphins Chiefs, but that of course takes away some of the top DFS guys. And then the Sunday night game is Bills Bengals, which is another high flying affair. But again, that takes some of the top prices. We don't get Josh Allen, we don't get Jamar Chase, we don't get Burrow, we don't get Mahomes, no Tua, no Tyreek Hill. No Waddle. So there's definitely a big space. And like you said, there's some ugliness here. So let's start with the quarterback position. At the top of it, it's Lamar Jackson and it's Jalen Hurts. I seem to recall last week we were kind of in agreement that in cash the way to go was to pay up. I did do that, but I chose the wrong guy. Hurts was the guy. Lamar was a bust last week. But we got the two of them again. Lamar Jackson is 8,200 and Jalen Hurts is 8,000. So they've actually switched places in the pricing scheme for right now. So let's start with you, Eric. How are you approaching these guys from both a cash and a GPP perspective this week?
Yeah, both firmly in play in terms of cash, right? Like prolific offenses, the rushing floor, just everything that you're looking for. In terms of GPP, it's kind of a tricky spot. I like paying up this week. These are certainly the two premium options. Of the two, I'll probably err on the side of Jalen Hurts, but he also projects to be the most popular quarterback, and by a pretty wide margin. He's pushing 20% rostership, and you usually don't see that at this position. So that gives me some concern overall. But the thing that has me, kind of steering away from Lamar in the tournament context is I'm not really in love with any of the run back options on the Seattle side of that game, right? So if I'm going to invest in a GPP quarterback, I want someone that I can not only stack with but have confidence in their run back options. And Lamar doesn't quite check that last box. So both fine cash plays, very defendable on merit alone. I don't really like how either of them fit into the tournament context specifically.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I think if the Philadelphia Dallas game shoots out, I'm kind of into a Hurts Brown Lamb stack, but that's easier said than done when you're factoring in the price tags here. You're talking about AJ Brown is the highest priced wide receiver on the slate, and CeeDee Lamb is, I'm just going to look right now, but I mean I'm pretty sure it's top five. He's third, he's 8,200 also. So you got to get really creative to do that. And then I'm with you on the Jackson thing too. I do not like Seattle at all this week. And I've made that known on Twitter, pretty decisively that their matchup is absolutely horrendous against Baltimore. And I'll get into that, with some of the receiver plays as we get going later. But, as far as cash goes, I'm with you here, and I'm leaning the side of Hurts. He does technically have the tougher matchup of the two than Lamar Jackson. He's facing the Cowboys, and Jackson's facing Seattle. But it's just the ownership there. You said that he's kind of running away with it too, and that was a difficult decision for me last week, where the two of these guys were even. So you really had to kind of pick right, or you were dead in the water. I think the fact that Hurts is looking like he's almost double the rostership of Lamar, who is the second highest rostered quarterback, I think that makes it a pretty easy decision for cash. You just you follow the rostership there, and you get a guy that I think is actually a slightly better play anyway, just with the with the rushing floor and with the air yards that's going on with AJ Brown. All right, so that's the top two guys. Before we move into the mid tier, we've got some of our regulars and our favorites here in chat. We've got Bob Harris, who you can hear with Mike on the Football Diehards shortly. I'll be joining those guys at 10:20 tonight, 10:20 Eastern, to talk DFS after our show. And then we've got Wendy Early and Albert Mariquin, who are two of our favorites. Wendy. So we appreciate you being in there tonight. Yeah, they're great. And then Robert Ferenc with his Lions logo, who has joined us before, and he actually has a question. So I'm actually going to segue his question into the mid tier here. So his question is nothing, because I just X'd out the page. What about Dak in cash on FanDuel? It says Dak is 8,200 and Hurts is 9,000. So are you a FanDuel player, Eric?
Largely not. I tend to stick to DraftKings.
Okay, so I'm going to take this one. I do play cash on FanDuel. I don't generally do as many GPPs there as I do on DraftKings, but I do play cash. And Robert, I think that if you're in that range there, you want Hurts. Find the extra 8,000 there. Dak is not near the floor ceiling player that Hurts is, and they're just priced too close together there for me to have any interest in Dak at 8,200. On DraftKings, where it's a $1,500 difference and it's a lot more dynamic pricing, I think that's maybe a little bit more palatable to drop that down there. So I would say no, he's not a cash play for me on FanDuel. But let's digress a little bit there, and I'll have you talk about Dak Prescott at 6,500, Eric. What are your thoughts on him, in general, and then in the DraftKings context here?
Yeah, look, for me, I mean, obviously it's been kind of a bumpy ride for Dak Prescott over the course of the season, but he's the clear pivot off of the Jalen Hurts chalk, right? He is the other side of this high scoring game. I do like the over on this game, so I like it to shoot out a bit, but he's coming in at like a third of the rostership of Jalen Hurts, and we need only go back to last week where he put up nearly 30 fantasy points, right? So he's clearly got the ceiling, but also, this isn't a 1 week fluke, right? The week prior to that, he had a 25 spot. He's got a 20 spot earlier in the season against a very tough Jets defense. And, for how much confidence and faith they have as a unit top to bottom, Philadelphia actually isn't too bad of a matchup against opposing quarterbacks. They're actually allowing the fourth most fantasy points to the position on the season and from a per game basis, right? So, I mean, he's in a fine spot. I'm kind of surprised to see him hovering around that like 5 or 6% range, because he is the clear door number 2 for people that want to get into this game.
Yep, I agree. And my DraftKings player pool is pretty much 2 players for cash. It's one of the quarterbacks in this game right now. I mentioned Hurts, and I'm probably going to lean that way just because of the massive rostership. But if I decide that, I need a skill player position that I don't have in there yet, I have no problem dropping down to him at $1,500 less. That FanDuel question, that's a little bit more difficult. $800 difference isn't like nothing on FanDuel. So I just take the better guy in Hurts there. We've got a few more people joining us. We're humming in the chat today. Toronto Dave, one of the best, is in here. BFO Gnarly, I love that name, is joining us as well. And he also has a question this week. So I guess we'll kind of ask his question because we're talking about it now. He said, good call last week, Jamie, on mid-tier QBs, Dak and Burrow. Thank you. I appreciate it. Curious who you like this week. So we're in the mid-tier now, Eric. So who besides Dak do you like in this kind of 5,500 to 6,500 range? Dak at the high end. Who else are we looking at here?
Yeah, there's nobody that's as big a priority as Dak in this mid-tier for me. Some honorable mentions. Sam Howell continues to just completely pepper his receiver with targets. The volume there is insane, and there's not really a whole lot to worry about in terms of that New England defense. So he's fine, right? Derek Carr, he's drawing some rostership, which is kind of weird. He's sitting around 10% right now. I think this is people looking at the Chicago Bears defense on the season, but actually over these last couple of weeks, this Bears defense is kind of rounded into form. And then, they went out and got this guy named Montez Sweat. So he's someone that I think is maybe a bit of a trap, right? The Chicago Bears defense is just is the dorm that they want for. If you really want to get into a very low owned option, Daniel Jones is sitting around 2.5-3%. He, to a much lesser extent, is another quarterback that offers a nice rushing floor. And, while Las Vegas turned over their entire outfit, basically, I don't expect to see, immediate gains in terms of their defensive efficiency. So he should be in a decent enough spot and will largely be overlooked.
Yeah, I'm very torn on how I want to use him. I mean, he's got that neck injury, and then they have that offensive line that's just a swinging gate. But his at that price, it's really hard to beat his rushing upside. And this is Raiders defense, has a good pass rush, but largely is beatable. I like that play as well. He's the other one in this mid tier that I'm looking at. It's just I'm not quite sure yet how to use him. So yeah, that's our mid tier guys. I think I'm with you. And I'll just quickly mention, because I've gotten a lot of Geno Smith questions this week. Um, and some of them comparing him to players that I think are really, really better this week and not close. So I mean, this is Geno Smith's worst matchup of the year. The Ravens have allowed 4.6 yards per pass attempt this year and have the most sacks, and have given up the fewest fantasy points per game to quarterback. There is no reason whatsoever to be playing Geno Smith this week. There's no DFS upside. I would say I'm looking at my rankings right now. I think I have him outside the top 24. No, I don't. I have him 22, but close enough. That's kind of what we're looking at with him. So I wouldn't fall into that trap this week. There's the game itself looks like it's a lot more appealing than it is, but I think it's the Baltimore side. And like you said earlier in the Lamar blurb, there's really nothing appealing on the Seattle side to bring back. So I would avoid the Seattle offense this week. All right, so we're into the lower tier now. And we're joined by Birdman, who has treble clefs as his emojis. I can always appreciate that as a music teacher. Who is a Ravens fan. He just loves his Ravens defense. So the lower tier's got some fun stuff. We've got Jaron Hall starting for Minnesota at 4,800. We've got Aiden O'Connell starting for the Raiders at 4,500. Clayton Tune is making his first start for the Cardinals. I don't trust many people down in this range too much. I think I'm okay with Baker Mayfield in GPPs. I think I'm definitely okay with Aiden O'Connell in GPPs. None of these players should be anywhere near your cash lineup, as much as that low price for quarterback allows you to get AJ Brown and CeeDee Lamb in there if you wanted that. But I don't know. There's so much opportunity at quarterback this week. So I'm not touching any of these guys for cash. Who do you like for the GPPs, and how might you stack them?
Yeah, so this territory is exclusively in the GPP context, right? There's nobody that really offers the safety you're looking for in cash. Down here there are three names that caught my attention. Totally agree with your Aiden O'Connell point of view. I mean, 4.5K is almost like a free space, right? And no offense, but in a pretty good spot against your Giants defense, right? So pretty good likelihood to pay that off. There, I mean, there's a couple of angles where I could see him actually making a little bit of noise this week. So like him, he's largely going to be overlooked despite his low price tag. Gardner Minshew, I mean, it's going to be a roller coaster ride, right? Like he'll throw for a couple of touchdowns. He'll have a fumble, have an interception. He'll look completely lost out there, but have 2 rushing touchdowns, right? Like it ebbs and it flows, but it does so over the course of a single game to the point where 5.2K, there's a good line of sight to paying that off. A couple of good stacking partners, a couple of good run back options. Not mad at that at all. And then lastly, I am ready to get hurt again. I made this exact same point a few weeks ago when he was 5.5K. Now Deshaun Watson is 5.4K in the absolute nuts matchup against the Arizona Cardinals. He claims that he will not be healthy all season, so let's hope that he's at least healthy enough to play more than the 4 snaps that he played last time I was touting him. But because of all this, I don't expect him to be popular. Obviously, he's got the rushing upside to really make some noise on the slate. But all of these, again, are rolls of the dice and should only be considered in the largest of tournaments.
Yeah, that Watson a couple weeks ago you're talking about. I mean, I fell for that hard. I played him in cash that week. The guy threw 5 passes, 1 was a pick, and then then he was gone. So there was no chance for me that week. But yeah, no, I like that play. He for sure is GPP playable in that in that context you're talking about right now. So that's the quarterbacks. Before we leave it, by the way, we're joined by Mr. Scampers. The gang's all here tonight, Eric. We better have our A game. We have the one more question. So the question from BFO Gnarly before we leave the quarterback position is, any thoughts on Stroud for GPP? I haven't really gone there. What about you, Stroud? You have any interest in tournaments?
Not really. They're not quite as elite as they were, but this Tampa Bay Bucks defense, I mean, they've got shades of that like Super Bowl caliber unit that we saw years ago still out there, right? So like they're fairly effective at slowing guys down. There are a couple of injury considerations on the Houston side to where I think this offense in general is probably going to be a little stuck in the mud tomorrow. So for that reason, he just doesn't have the upside that I'm looking for a tournament play.
I agree, and the game total is down to 39.5. I mean, that's not really, unless you think it's wrong, that's not really where you want to go in GPP, and I don't really think it's wrong. I think that profiles is exactly how it's going to play out.
To be fair, 39.5 is like the fifth highest game on the board, though.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. There are some that would pray to reach that total this week.
Yeah, right.
I think, what are the Giants game? That's in the mid 30s, I think, right? 35, something along those lines.
Yeah.
I'm looking. No, we're up to 37.
37 and a half. Yeah.
They're robust 37.5. All right. So moving on to the running back position. Keep those questions coming, guys. We love the audience participation, really. So running back position, again, this is kind of a big drop off after the top. So I'm going to start with Alvin Kamara, and I'm curious how you're treating him in GPP. He is the quintessential cash play. He's the most expensive running back on the slate, which I didn't think we were ever going to see again after the last couple of years, and it looked like he was slowing down. But 8,100, it seems like with some of the underpriced running backs we have in the mid-tier that you don't need Kamara, but I think you really should try and play him in DraftKings cash if you can. I mean, as much as he's been doing for this team, he's got 44 targets over the last 4 weeks. He's now facing the Bears, who have given up the most receptions the most receiving yards in the league to opposing running backs. And not only that, the second place team is 110 receiving yards lower than the Bears have allowed to running backs. So, I mean, and it's a good rushing matchup. So I think even at an elevated price, you should prioritize Kamara in DK cash. FanDuel, if you're playing that, he's expensive there and it's half point PPR. Maybe that's a different story. But DraftKings, to me, I don't see what the purpose of fading him would be at that price. How about GPP for you?
Yeah, like is always the case with GPP, it's going to boil down to rostership. Right now, I see him in like the mid-teens, kind of that 15 to 17% range, and that's fine. You can create plenty of leverage going overweight on that, which is very much so the move, right? Since returning from his suspension, he's averaging like 25 touches a game, which is just wild to say. Drilling into the matchup specifically, as I was touting the Bears defense, looking like the 85 Bears out there earlier, they are the toughest matchup in the league in terms of yards per carry, second toughest in terms of yards per carry to opposing running backs, 3.3 yards. But to your point, and like with the Buccaneers defense of old that I was talking about, the counterpunch is right there, right? You can throw the ball to your back out of the backfield, where they are number one at 10.4 yards per reception to running backs catching the balls out of the backfield. Alvin Kamara is kind of good at that, right? So, this sets up for a perfect game, right? Talked about Montez Sweat earlier. More pressure on Derek Carr, more incentive to get the ball to that outlet out of the backfield. I mean, this is just wheels up for Alvin Kamara. You can absolutely go overweight. If we get to tomorrow morning and he's pushing 25, 28%, maybe you look at kind of fading him to an extent. But this is the guy that should be on a quarter of your builds at minimum.
Yeah, I agree. And he's had, of his 5 games played so far this year, he's had 2 that he's had double-digit catches, which I think is well
Mhm.
within the range of outcomes that, given what you just said here. Um, by the way, before we move on, we have some breaking news here that Matthew
Ooh.
Stafford is unlikely to play against the Packers. It's not ruled out yet, but sources say the plan is for Brett Rippon to get the start on Sunday. So we can kind of analyze that a little bit on the fly when we get into the wide receivers portion of this to see how we're treating the Rams receivers. But let's move on to the mid tier of running backs. There's so much here to love. And I'm going to kick it off again with the cash play. Josh Jacobs at 6,900 is absurd. That is, I don't like to throw the lock word around because then you get married to stuff and you don't allow yourself to pivot. But this is about as close to a lock as I can see at 6,900. On top of the massive carry share that he has this year, which he's not quite matching last year, but he's still got a 70% snap share. He's also got a 22% target share so far this year, which is easily a career high for him. And that was higher when Aiden O'Connell was the quarterback. So the fact that the Giants also traded away Leonard Williams, who is an elite run stuffer, I don't see how you fade Josh Jacobs in cash. But we have some other underpriced running backs here. We have Tony Pollard at 6,800. We have Jonathan Taylor at 6,400. Bijan Robinson, I'm a huge fan of this week at 6,100. What are some of the plays you're into in this one? I think based on our conversations this week, we're going to be pretty lockstep this week.
Yeah, by and large, I almost highlighted the entire mid tier, right? Like these are guys that I'm gonna have heavy exposure to. I'm gonna be rotating around throughout my player pool for tomorrow's games. Jacobs, the volume is insane. Pollard and Swift, not great matchups necessarily, but they are relatively under rostered ways to get into that priority game. So they'll be in the pool. Taylor, 6.4K is laughable, and we're going to see him continue to take more and more work out of that backfield. Bijan Robinson is so frustrating because he got to this 6.1K number, which is a very reasonable price. This is where we wanted to get. And because of that, just immediately soaks up all the rostership, right? He's pushing like 15%. That's about where I would want to have him, right? So anything beyond that, I'll be underweight, but the price is right. And then lastly, everyone's favorite inefficient runner, Rachaad White at 5.6K. Also gets he gets a Texans defense that sets up kind of similarly to the Bears that I mentioned before. They're actually much better in terms of slowing down running backs in with their yards per carry than they are relative to their yards per reception. And the receiving line is really what is buoying Rachaad White's viability. So another game where he should haul in, his fair share of passes and can do his damage through the air. So at 5.6K, he can definitely pay off that number.
Yeah, I agree. I almost got chopped in an industry guillotine league that I'm in with fairly big names there because I benched him. And then I survived a near-death experience because Jacoby Myers did nothing. I mean, Jacoby Myers, I think, had to get 6 points to eliminate me, and somehow I'm still in the league. But, I do have White back in because he does have that pass-catching floor like you described. So thing on Bijan Robinson that I'm going to add that I like is that I think with Drake London out, I think that really, really heightens Bijan's target floor, which I was still a little bit wary if London was going to play. I mean, we did see it was such a weird split. Like, what do you make of this? Bijan last week after that whole migraine whatever debacle, he had 50 snaps. He played 50 snaps, and Algier only played 15, which makes it look like he completely dominated the top, but he still only had 11 touches, and Algier had... Eric, you're moving again on my end. Are you with us?
Am I back now? Am I here?
You're back now. Yes.
So
right. I don't know if we heard you, but what's your Bijan Robinson take? As far as
look, I think this is... I think this is going to be the story for the better part of the year, right? They're both going to be out there a fair amount. Their snap share is going to ebb and flow, but their opportunity share, especially when you consider their target share as pass catchers, is probably going to be pretty close to each other on a week in and week out basis. I do think that this week with Drake London out, there are a few more targets to go around in Bijan's direction. So that's also informing why he's projected to be one of the more popular options this week.
Yeah, I would say so as well. And I'm just going to pick this up. And you can put a GPP take on this too. So Robert Farrington chat, he says, what do you recommend in the flex spot on DK, wide receiver or running back this week? So that's a tough question. I don't want to get married to saying your flex should always be a certain position in whatever contest you play there. I have found that typically, in the running back pool, I will have at least 3 running backs that I think are above average to elite cash plays. And I think this week that does follow suit again. So, Robert, it's almost entirely certain that I will have 3 running backs in cash. GPP though, why don't you talk about that in GPP, because it is a good strategy question for the flex, Eric.
Yeah, your point is spot on. In cash, it's almost always going to be the running back. They just have a nice clean midpoint in their projection. Whereas it's quite the opposite in tournaments, right? Usually you can get some considerable upside at a fairly modest price with a wide receiving option. So usually my only pillars, the only legs of my stool are A, it's got to be someone in the late window of games. Always, you want that flexibility. And B, I find myself using my flex spot a lot to roster a very very lightly owned player, right? Most of my stacks tend to be kind of medium to high level popularity. So I like going to my flex as a guy that's in that kind of 1% to 3% range. Typically a wide receiver because that pool is bigger, and typically a little bit of a salary saver because you can still reach into that upside without paying top dollar at the position.
Yep, I think you hit on that perfectly, and that's really how you should be approaching that flex position. In a vacuum. Obviously, slate's different, but that's as general an answer as I think we can give on that one. All right, so real quick before we get to the wide receivers, there are some cheap running backs to be had here. I think you're going to find that Devin Singletary is the cheap one that is going to be the highest rostered here. With Dameon Pierce out, he should be a workhorse for the Texans. It's not the best matchup, in this one, considering that Tampa Bay has Vita Vea, unless he's been ruled out that I didn't see, but I don't think so. They give it up the 3rd fewest points per game to fantasy points per game to running backs. I don't think for cash that matters too much. I think you take that kind of free square at the position and run with it and get some high upside running backs and wide receivers around him. That helps you pay up for Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson if you want there. So what's GPP is a different story though, or is it? Is he so cheap that it doesn't matter there? How are you approaching Singletary?
I mean, you can do it, right? The flexibility you get with the rest of your roster is is nothing to sneeze at. But it's also, it's not like there aren't other very viable options that are very reasonably priced as well. So my concern for Singletary, the volume's there, which is great, but this matchup is fairly tough, and I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of offense in this game in particular. So underweight, if not close to a fade for me in the tournament context. Looking elsewhere in the low tier, Kareem Hunt and his running in slow motion style of his 2023 self is in my pool because he is projected at like 2%, and Jerome Ford is projected closer to 12. And they're going to see a pretty even distribution of carries in that backfield. So 5.5K, it's not going to be fun watching him, but it's a good matchup. He gets plenty of goal line and red zone work. He's in the pool. Ramondre Stevenson, I think this is 4 weeks in a row now. 5.4K for a guy that is going to catch the ball out of the backfield as often as he does is the incorrect price. He should be like a 6.2 to 6.5K player. So, you have to take advantage of that. Chuba Hubbard at 5K flat is probably going to be fairly popular. He's got a good matchup against Indy. He seems to have emerged as at least the lead or primary option in this backfield. Keontae Ingram is another one that's going to look gross. 4.3K. We're not expecting Mari DiMarcato out there, so he'll get at least enough touches to potentially pay that off. And then a dart throw. I like Roschon Johnson to even more of this week and really be the primary pass catching option in that backfield in a game that I think Chicago is likely to trail. 0.5K. He can probably get you a little cheap backdoor cover with his work as a receiver.
All right, I like it. I'm with you on a few of these things too. So last question before we move on to wide receiver. Do you view Ingram as a viable straight line pivot off of Singletary here? I mean, I know it's kind of gross, but they are the same price and he will be less rostered. So is that a viable thing or is that just kind of fishing there?
No, it's something to consider for sure, right? I have concerns about what this Arizona offense is going to be with Clayton Tune against this very much so elite Cleveland defense, right? So the logic is sound. I worry that we're going to be in a situation where the running game is abandoned very early in this one for the Cardinals, and it's a difficult hole to dig out of if you're rostering that running back.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you there. All right, so that's the running back position. Moving on to wide receiver. And again, if you have questions, get them in there. We'll get to them. We've got a nice active chat tonight, which we love. So we kind of already touched on AJ Brown and CeeDee Lamb with the quarterback positions earlier, but again, we'll just kind of highlight that game is with the two big games being off the main slate, that is the best one for the main slate that we're dealing with the highest total on the slate. We've got upper 40s. No other game is approaching that. It's a tough matchup for AJ Brown, but he is absolutely cooking right now. Same as CeeDee Lamb. So I think you can use both of those guys in whatever formats. Let's talk about Adam Thielen here, Eric. He's up to 7,500 now. He was 6,600 last week. That's starting to get, I guess, I thought a little bit uncomfortable, but it's not for people because he is showing rostership. I'm looking at my thing here. It looks like he's a top 5 rostered wide receiver, top 4 rostered wide receiver right now. Which I guess is viable. I mean, he's got a 30% target share in 3 straight weeks now. I had no clue that he still had this in him. I thought he was done 2 years ago. So, I mean, I'm fine with it, right? If you want to play him in cash, absolutely at 7,500. What's your take on Thielen here? Is it too much money now, or is he still priced fine to play?
He's fine to play. I was surprised to see him pushing, top 5 rostership at this price tag, because in 2023, paying 7.5K for Adam Thielen was also not on my bingo card. But I mean, the role demands it, and while he still operates as their primary slot option, he's going to see about a third of his coverage or of his routes in Tony Brown's coverage. He is a second stringer that played his first full game last week and basically let everybody in New Orleans catch every single pass that was thrown into his coverage. He doesn't have good closing speed. He doesn't tackle well. A lot of yards after catch. He's already given up a touchdown, right? It'll account for 12 or 14 of Thielen's targets, but those targets can be where that upside to pay off 7.5K are born from. So I don't mind going there in tournaments, specifically stacking this game with Thielen as a run back. You get a little bit of leverage off of the Chuba Hubbard chalk, and the Colts side aren't projecting a ton of rostership. So as a trio, not looking at a very popular texture overall. So Thielen is in the pool at 7.5K, which is weird to say.
Yeah, I dig it for sure. And just to go back to FanDuel for a second, because I was building my FanDuel cash, and the way it kind of worked out with some of the cheap plays that you could play is I had my last spot building was 8,300 for a wide receiver, and I opened up the pool and was like, oh, I'm going to get somebody good here that's going to pair well, because I have AJ Brown in there too. That's going to pair really well with Brown. And I look and see, and it's Thielen and it's Devontae Adams. And I'm looking at those two, and I'm thinking to myself, what do I do here? And I'm thinking to myself, am I really having trouble choosing between Adam Thielen and Devontae Adams right now? And Adams is cheaper than him too on FanDuel. So let's segue off of that. Where are you on Devontae Adams this week? He's been abysmal the last 2 weeks, but was that really his fault? What's your take on him? I mean, you got to like him, right, this week?
I absolutely love him this week. If you go back to the prior game with Aiden O'Connell, we saw his average depth of target increase. We saw him get a good volume of looks. And for however abysmal Devontae Adams has been on the season, he's still wide receiver 13 on the year, wide receiver 19 on a per game basis, right? So, like, if Aiden O'Connell comes in and just makes him a priority, again, against your fairly favorable New York Giants secondary, I mean, Devontae Adams has slate breaking potential this week, right? Like, he'll see a good amount of Adoree Jackson, who's doing some shadowing this year, but not being particularly effective at it. And Devontae Adams is sitting at like 7% rostership. So he was one of the people I talked about, or at least hinted to earlier when we were talking about rostering Aiden O'Connell. Devontae Adams, we obviously are well aware of what the floor is, but the ceiling is still within reach. And if he's going to be overlooked, he's going to be someone that I'll be making a point to weave in.
Yeah, and he's 600 more on DraftKings, which is, I think partly what's driving him to be so less rostered than Adam Thielen there. Thielen has, of course, been much safer, and, you can get him at $600 less. But that FanDuel, going back to that FanDuel thing, not only is Adams $300 less, their rostership is even here. So you've got to pick. Which one do you pick of the two there? Like, this is a raw score question. Who's outscoring the other one?
I think it's most likely Adam Thielen, right? And I'm glad that this is a FanDuel context question, because most people go to FanDuel for cash games. And that floor is measurably safer for Adam Thielen than it is for Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I would tend to agree there as well. And I think we just follow your same point on pivot to Devontae Adams, even at similar rostership, because he obviously has the ceiling that can outmatch not only Thielen, but anybody. So it's an interesting one. So before we get to the mid tier here, I do want to just touch back on that Rams quarterback news that we got earlier, that Brett Rippon is expected to start for the Rams. It's still not confirmed. They said there's been good stuff for Stafford as the week has gone along. To quote Adam Schefter here, it says, in the middle of this past week, one source said it would have been unthinkable for Stafford to play, but he's made progress. He wants to play and is fighting to play, but they are preparing that it's Rippon. So I think it sounds like it's going to be Rippon. Do you have any interest in Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua with Rippon under center?
I do not. This can be a fairly ugly afternoon if it is Brett Rippon under center in a game that's already sub 40 in terms of its total.
Yep, agreed. And I think Green Bay is not a good defense for fantasy, but I think we can maybe fire him up as a streamer or like a dart GPP defense throw in this one with Rippon under center too. So I think we're in agreement there. All right, let's move to the mid tier here. This is the $5,500 to $7,000 range. Just to reiterate what we had said before, I am not interested in either Seattle wide receiver who is in this tier. I have a hard time getting into Jordan Addison in this tier with Jaron Hall starting at quarterback. My two favorite players are at the bottom of this tier at 5,600 and 5,700. I'm a huge fan of Terry McLaurin this week. Like you said with the Howell thing, he is throwing the ball all over the place. The fact that they just traded their two best defensive players on what was already a terrible defense makes me think they're going to be playing from behind this game. Curtis Samuel is out for Washington. McLaurin is simply too cheap at 5,600. So he's somebody that I'm also close to locking into cash as well. He's got 3 double-digit target games the last 5 weeks, and a fourth one was 9 targets. So 5,600 for me, that's such a nice cash play. I think he carries some requisite upside there too if he can score. And then Zay Flowers, again, he burned me a little bit last week, but he's the same price. You pointed out that it's hard to gauge how to play this game with such a mismatch of offenses here, but this is I'm sorry. Baltimore is not playing Arizona this week. They're playing Seattle. So, we could have a little bit better football game here. Flowers has 9 red zone targets and 4 inside the 10, and he's only scored once. So I'm thinking that this is a good week for that positive touchdown regression to come. And his price hasn't moved, like I said. So those are probably the two guys I'm looking for most in cash. Where are you in this tier?
Yeah, love both those calls, and I'll add to Zay Flowers. Not only does he have all these opportunities when they're in scoring range, but also, despite all of his volume, hasn't broken 100 yards receiving yet, right? So like the upside is just palpable with this guy, to the point where he's very much so in tournament consideration. Elsewhere in the mid tier, Jacoby Myers has played better than I think most people expected for the Raiders. He is in as beneficial a spot as Devontae Adams is, but he is significantly less expensive and is only going to be rostered on like 3% of teams out there. So he'll be in the pool. Michael Pittman, I talked earlier. I don't mind at all firing up some Minshew Pittman stacks with like a Thielen or a Chuba Hubbard run back. He is not projected to be particularly popular himself. So another guy that, you can definitely work with in terms of his rostership. And like I mentioned earlier, willing to get hurt again, Amari Cooper. I am going to continue with my theory of the crime that Deshaun Watson, is a positive force for this offense. And that obviously means good things for Amari Cooper at 6.1K, largely being, not largely, he's drawing kind of, that 7 to 10% range. So not incredibly popular, a guy that is going to get that Arizona secondary that we've been beating up all year.
Yep, and rightfully so. I definitely don't mind a GPP stack of the two of them, and I'm curious as we get into the bottom tier here if you're going to like Elijah Moore as much. We'll get to that in a sec. So the lower tier, there's some interesting ones down here as well. I think the biggest thing we'll talk about here is Drake London. We mentioned before with Bijan that Drake London is out, so that takes away the top pass catcher for Atlanta. Their wide receivers are a disaster after him. So I don't really see the need to get into any of that. For me, Demario Douglas is a cash lock this week at 4,000 on DraftKings and 5,400 on FanDuel. We've got Kendrick Bourne, who tore his ACL. Devontae Parker is doubtful. So that means, and Douglas was playing a good amount anyway. So his wide receiver competition, if you take away the tight ends and Ramondre Stevenson, who catches passes too, is Jalen Reagor, who famously was drafted over Justin Jefferson. Juju Smith-Schuster, who I don't know what to make of this guy. He's still young, but he looks like he's done. I mean, he didn't even play last week until Kendrick Bourne got hurt. And then they have Tyquan Thornton and somebody else that I'm missing. But, at any rate, Douglas should get fed in this game. And it's a game where they're facing Washington, who doesn't have Chase Young or Montez Sweat anymore, was already giving up the second most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. So I'm all over Douglas this week, but he is the highest rostered. So do you see any path to a bust with him that maybe it's fair to fade at that high ownership or come under the field at least in GPP?
I mean, I think the argument to go underweight is just concern about upside in this offense overall, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Right.
from a straight line, his likelihood to pay off a very reasonable 4K price tag. He's checking all the boxes, right? He's already the most dynamic receiving option, save for maybe Ramondre Stevenson in this entire offense, and the Red Sea has parted for him, right? Everyone that was standing in his way in terms of playing time is now no longer there. So he'll be out there a ton. He looks pretty good with the ball in his hands. He'll continue to develop. 4K is fine. You'll pay that off pretty readily.
Yeah, I think so too. He doesn't need to do all that much to pay off 4K, and I think he can do a lot more than he does. Wandale, 3,500. I guess. Oh, I just see Mr. Scampers. Mr. Scampers and I are of one mind right now. He doesn't have to do much at 3,500. He had a 22% target share with Daniel Jones, who's back. So again, with the pass rush from the Raiders, those quick outs to Wandale, I think that's a fine PPR floor. And on the other end, Terry McLaurin at 600 more than Jahan Dotson seems like a far more sensible play. So I'm not going to go to Dotson at 5,000 for cash, but I mean, you have to figure he's in the GPP pool. So who else is in your player pool here? Is Elijah Moore there?
Yeah, we hit on a lot of the names. Elijah Moore at 3.9K, has been at least incrementally more productive when Watson's out there. So like his spot, like Watson returning for him, like his price tag, obviously. Jahan Dotson, like you alluded to, he is the pivot off of a moderately popular Terry McLaurin. We saw him kind of come back to life here over this last game. So 5K is fine, nothing to worry about in the New England secondary. Beyond that, like Josh Downs, as another way to get back into this game, he recorded an injury midweek. But he was able to log limited practices Thursday and Friday after that. So I think he should be able to go, right? If it was all that problematic, you probably would have popped up as a DMP yesterday. So the fact that he was out there, like him to try to give it a go, but certainly some news to watch. And then I like the New Orleans receivers not named Chris Olave. I like both Michael Thomas and Rashid Shaheed. That is because these are the two guys that will see the least amount of time covered by Jalen Johnson. That is the matchup that you want to avoid. So they'll get more exposure to Kyler Gordon and to Tyreek Stevenson, players that have been kind of abused throughout the season. So both these guys in kind of the mid 4K range are fine options as well.
Yep. I'm with you there too. And I think you're right. I think Downs is going to play after all that, but it's definitely something to watch. And we have a relevant question. Let's see. Actually, we have two questions, but we'll get to this one who is kind of relevant to what we just talked about. So Birdman with another question. Full PPR, Dotson or Christian Watson? I'll let you take that one. You just talked up Dotson. So what are you playing there? That's another one that I don't know if we were expecting to answer this year so far.
Yeah, right. So I just talked up Dotson in the GPP context. I think if we're talking season long here, I'm giving the edge to Christian Watson. They are 6 spots apart in my rankings, but I've got Christian Watson ahead ever so slightly. This perimeter defense for the Rams has been kind of better than expected, but there's still been times where they've been exposed, and obviously Watson has the skill set to do that on any given play. So, both are not without their risks, but I've got Watson just slightly ahead.
Yep, and I'm looking at my own rankings while you were talking. I have Watson 35, Dotson 36. So that is a viable question out there, and I think we're both slightly leaning Dotson. So thank you for that. Chris Worstel has one here. This will be a good segue to us too. We got about 10 minutes left to get to the tight ends here, but this is a DFS question. I'm going to give it to you also. I want to get Kamara or Olave in every lineup. Who is the Okay, so this is really asking you who's the Chicago Bear bring back to the Kamara Olave lineups. Yes, Komet is the best one. What do you think's the Bear bring back if you want one?
I mean, it's kind of a wasteland. DJ Moore is going to continue to see volume, which is what you're looking for, right? With Bajent back under center, it's going to be very low A-dot volume. But that volume is nothing to sneeze at. DJ Moore is certainly talented enough to make some noise after the catch, but it's kind of a rough spot overall, right? This Saints secondary is very good this year. I guess I would lean towards Moore, because if you're stacking with a bring back, you're looking for upside, and that's really the only place you can get it on the Bears offense.
Yeah, I'll go one step further here, and I'll say I haven't really considered Saints stacks for GPPs in this one, but I'll say that I don't even think you need one, and I'll even double down on that and saying that you can play the Saints defense with them. Just go a total Saints drubbing in that one, where they take advantage of the soft spots on the Bears defense and then brutalize Bajent on all of his dropbacks too. I think I'd be more than open to building those Saints skill players in, and then the Saints defense as a doubler there, or a tripler even. But thank you for that question. We are into the tight ends, which will segue off the Komet. So the only tight end in the high tier is Mark Andrews at 6,800. TJ Hockenson with the quarterback change has dropped into the mid tier at 5,200. So real quick, are you into Mark Andrews this week?
Yes. Not in love with the price tag, but this offense is clicking, and you can certainly pencil him in to be the most likely to lead the position in scoring. At least based on this slate, right? A lot of the guys we like to target are playing early in the morning or late in the night or into Monday.
Yep. And I'm not going there in cash. You can. He's, like you said, he is the most likely to lead the position in fantasy points, but it's just not a cash build to pay, a tier above everyone else for. We'll call him not Travis Kelce at this point. So into the mid tier here. Now, Hockenson is the one that I've been really intrigued to talk to you about here, because right now I'm going to double check. I'm going to refresh my ownerships here just so we can get the most accurate number here. But for most of the second part of this week, from Wednesday on, he has been looking like massive chalk at the tight end position, and he still is the highest rostered, although the gap has closed on him considerably of what I saw, Wednesday and Thursday. So I get it, 5,200, that's about a $1,500 drop from, Kirk Cousins led TJ Hockenson. So it doesn't seem like Jaron Hall under center is scaring anybody off of Hockenson, or they're just excited to play such a talented player at that price tag. I'm very torn on how I want to treat that. What's your approach to Hockenson this week?
To your point, I think this is largely to do with the price adjustment. Getting Hockenson at about 5K is just the stuff that DFS dreams are made of. So people are taking their opportunity to click the button. I think we might have conflicting rostership projections on him specifically. You said that you updated to maybe I'm a little behind. I see him around 8%. That's fine. Like, you can totally work with that. I think the larger consideration is it's kind of hard to get correlated on this one, right? Like, he'll be in the pool for your Bijan builds, certainly, right? But the other piece that I like in this offense would eat up a roster spot that Hockenson would occupy. So where I'm building Bijan is really the only place I would consider it, and that's
Mhm.
about 12 or 15% of my builds right now.
Okay, yeah. I don't know. I don't like fading big chalk if it's there. I kind of am of the mindset that it's there for a reason, and I'll just eat it. But I don't know. From a mindset that I'm either paying all the way up for Kelsey or just all the way down for a 3.5K or lower tight end in cash. I don't like just breaking the mold on that just because the guy's price tag dropped out of that tier. I mean, he's got a rookie QB going, and it's a tough defense that Atlanta has against passing games. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably going to err on the side of not playing Hawkinson in cash, but you certainly can if you can fit him in and you're comfortable with the lineup because he is currently the highest rostered. Um, what about Dallas Goedert? He also seems too cheap at 4,800.
Yeah, too cheap. And as is often the case with tight ends, one of the lower rostered ways to get into a priority game, right? I see him around
Mm-hmm.
that kind of 5 to 7% range. His role in this offense has looked to stabilize in recent weeks, so certainly don't mind him here at 4.8K.
Yep, I agree too. I think the majority of Eagles stacks will click in. Will click in Hurts Brown or maybe Hurts Brown and Smith, and you're getting a little discount there. And it's a good matchup for tight ends. Dallas has been so far this year. So getting into that lower tier now is we got about 5 minutes left before we wrap it up. So I'm going to need some reassurance from you right now because currently my cash tight end is David Njoku, who I've been iffy about this week, but hearing you selling the Browns to our faithful here is making me feel a little bit better about the guy. He's got 17 targets over the last 2 weeks. We've of course made it clear that the Cardinals defense is soft. So 3,800, am I okay there, or should I look for somebody else in this range?
Yeah, I think you're okay there, right? Like to your prior point, I see him as the most popular tight end. So you can follow the crowd in that regard, and even if we don't see the Watson upside game that I am spinning a narrative around, I mean for him to pay off 3.8K, there's a lot of ways for him to get there, right? So don't mind him at all in the low tier.
All right, awesome. So now also let's talk to me about. I'm just turning this over to you now. Talk to me about Trey McBride. This is the I guess the biggest waiver wire pickup of the week, unless there's somebody that I'm forgetting. We knew that he was going to become an every down player when they put Zach Ertz on IR. Against Baltimore, he went 10 for 95 and a touchdown on 14 targets. That was my cash tight end at 2,800. Unfortunately, it was everybody's cash tight end at 2,800. So, we didn't really gain on the field there. So he's up to 3,700 now, and is facing the Browns, who we've said what a fantastic defense they are. Fewest fantasy points per game allowed to tight ends, and Clayton Tune is the quarterback this week. So how are you treating McBride in GPPs? He is not a cash play this week, I'm saying.
Yeah, he certainly is not a cash play. Where we sit right now, he's probably a bit too popular to be a tournament consideration either, right? The thing for me more than anything else is just the price tag. He's going to be out there a ton. We saw that announcement game last week where he had 14 targets and hauled in 10 of them for 95 yards. Obviously Josh Dobbs loves the tight end, and he's no longer under center for the Cardinals. But I do think McBride is an integral part of this offense. And more breaking news, according to sources, Michael Wilson is not expected to play tomorrow. And so we spent a lot of the offseason talking about how short in stature this Cardinals wide receiver core is. Michael Wilson was kind of the one thing that's not like the other. And with him not out there, Trey McBride is kind of the only big-bodied option, right? So, there are plenty of ways that this could go sideways, but I think he'll be out there a ton. I think the Cardinals will need to go to him if they want to move the ball. But at 9.5%, 10% rostership, probably not clicking that button right now. We'll see what it looks like in the morning. If it slides into that kind of 6 to 8% range, I might consider it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good assessment of this too with McBride. That's a difficult one. So a couple of odds and ends here before we end it here. Mr. Scampers has brought up he wants Higbee at 3,200 with a not Stafford at quarterback. That actually hadn't crossed my mind yet. I mean, I saw he did have 7 targets last week. Off the top of my head, I'll look it up while you're talking, but I'm not sure how many of those came from Rippon when he replaced Stafford in the lineup. Higbee was not in my player pool. Is that something to consider with the Rams QB news that we've heard?
I mean, if you're looking to create leverage, right? I think he's someone to consider, right? In the broad sense, we do see backup and rookie quarterbacks tend to lean on the tight end a little bit more. But the overarching point about my concern for this offense on the whole still persists, right? So, Higbee has a good chance of paying off that price tag in terms of just getting to value, but I don't see the upside that I would want to consider him for a tournament.
Yeah, I would tend to agree there. I'm interested to see how that one plays out too. And real quick, we have one more question in the chat, but wrap up the tight end position for us. Anyone else in this lower tier for you?
We talked about Kmet a little bit earlier. Old check down Charlie Bajent likes to get him some targets, right? So, those being close to the line of scrimmage, he can certainly haul those in fairly readily. 10 targets, 10 catches last week. 3.9K is fine. And as it is every single week, Atlanta runs 2 tight ends all the time. Kyle Pitts at 4.1K going up just a little bit. Jonnu Smith at 3.4K going down a little bit. With Drake London not in the game, probably going to see both of these guys get a few more looks. Obviously, in the case of Pitts, every time the ball is in his hands, he's got the ability to really break one, right? So I like him the most out of these low-tier options.
Yeah, I'll be playing Pitts in GPP for sure. And, it's almost just of the mindset that if it's not this week, when is it going to be? But it could, of course, still not be. Yep, one of these days. 3 years have gone by, but that day's coming. I'm still of the mindset that Pitts will not be anything ever until he's off that Atlanta offense, who is just run. They don't use him the way he's programmed to be used. But with London out, maybe this week he does have a spike game, but you still won't get consistency out of it. All right, so the question here in the chat, Jamie, if you have, this is for me. If you have Hurts and Thielen and cash on FanDuel, did I talk about my FanDuel cash? I don't even remember what happened half an hour ago on this show. I suppose you're going with Jacobs and Singletary at running back. Yes, I am. Are you paying down at the other wide receiver spots, tight end or defense in cash? Well, I haven't finished the lineup yet. That initial build that I talked about did finish it out. Where Thielen was the last piece. Yeah, I definitely had some cheap plays there. I don't have it up right now. I do not remember what tight end I had, but I definitely had Demario Douglas in there at 5,400. He's a cash lock no matter what site you're playing on. And the Patriots defense, I remember, we're not going to get the defenses this week, but the Patriots defense this week is my top one on both sites too for cash play, just, against that Washington offensive line. Howell's been sacked at least 4 times every game this season. So, I think that's a good one to go to. All right, so that is going to do it for us. Thank you, everybody. That was a great audience we had. We had questions, we had conversation, we had tons and tons of people watching us at throughout the existence of this show. So we really appreciate you in the comments. Good luck to everybody. Eric, real quick, where can everybody find you and your work?
Yeah, you can find all of it on my Twitter, which is @FantasyNav, NAV. Immediately following this, I'm going to be doing a preview of the Texans Buccaneers game for
Nice.
the High Point Sports Creator Network. So keep
Awesome.
your eyes out for that. Probably dropping in the next couple of hours. And then lastly, college basketball is here. We are breaking down the first college basketball DFS slate of the season tomorrow night at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. That is at Green Screens Media on YouTube.
Awesome. Absolutely check that out. I am going to soak up every ounce of your college basketball talk, especially with betting now legal in Maine, because I want to kind of, parlay that, no pun intended, into some college basketball bets. So thanks for that. We'll be checking you out. Check out all of Eric's work. You can find my stuff on Football Diehards and on Fantasy Pros every week. And I am, after this show is over, going to hop right over to SiriusXM Fantasy Channel 87, SiriusXM NFL Channel 88 to join Bob Harris and Mike Dempsey on the Football Diehards show to talk more DFS. So come on over with me over there for that segment, and you can hear probably just a repeat of what Eric and I talked about, but maybe a few more stats and throw in there as well. All right, so we're going to get out of here for now. Thanks for everything, guys. Hopefully we'll see you here next week at 9 Eastern, and good luck with your week lineups. Thanks for listening.